Today is a great day. The NRL is back and we're happy again.
Absolutely, John.
No more boring summer of useless tests. No more waiting. No more previewing. There's only reviewing today.
Yes, that's right, John. How are you, mate? Do you enjoy the games?
I did. They were both really good. Both games were really good games of football.
Yeah.
A lot of talking points to come out of them.
Yeah, 100%.
From even before the game.
Yeah. There's a lot to get through. I guess we'll start with that first game, John, that Rabbitohs Sea Eagles. Well done to Manly getting the job done 36-24.
Screwing up both of our tip.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm off to a bit of a rocky start in the tipping, John, but we'll get to that a bit later. Well done to Manly, John. I thought they were really good. I thought that Ola Kawatu try was really good, running off Cherry Evans. Jason Saab taking that intercept and scoring. Croker, Ben Trebojevic, Garrick and Luke Brooks getting over at the end there for them. They scored 6 tries. South scored 5. Richie Keno got 2. Jacob Gagai, Latrell Mitchell and Alex Johnston each got tries as well. I thought it was really Cherry Evans and Luke Brooks who took charge in the second half, John, and I think they got Manly home for victory in the first ever premiership match played outside Australia or New Zealand. So well done to the Sea Eagles. Hopefully their best players can stay injury free and they can have a good season this year, John.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good game of football, high intensity. There was a lot of blood.
Yes.
Which is not something you normally see with rugby league. It's normally reserved for MMA. A lot of blood.
Yes.
Quite a few blood bins throughout the match. So that just showed how hard they were going. I think Tom Turbo got the better of his opposing number, Latrell. But that's not to say Latrell didn't look really fit and really good.
Yeah.
He looked like he was actually playing football and ready to play properly for the year. Rabbitohs weren't bad. Sea Eagles just really outclassed him in that second half, like by a lot, and it comes on the back of Daly Cherry Evans and Luke Brooks just suddenly clicking all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it's like, if they can continue that, then that's going to be a strong year for the Sea Eagles. As I said, it all comes down to the fitness of their players, but Tom Trebojevic was able to get into the game on the back of the Manly forwards that ran hard and gave Cherry Evans and Luke Brooks a lot of space and time to make those plays. On the other side of the park, the Rabbitohs halves were kept quiet by great defence. What was his name? Lachlan Ilias had a big error at a crucial point in the game. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed the game. I love to see the Rabbitohs lose. Unfortunately, it was one of those like bittersweet things because I tipped wrong, but they still.
I will give Ilias credit. He did really well to run down Jason Saab there. Yeah. Saab's probably. I think it's probably a toss-up between him and Josh Adokar as the fastest player in the game. So for Ilias to chase him down and ankle tap him, I thought that was really good on Ilias's part. But you mentioned Latrell Mitchell, John. Obviously did some great things. Scored a try himself. He threw really good passes that led to those tries. Scored by Jacob Gagai and Alex Johnston. Latrell also had 117 run metres, 8 tackle breaks and 117 run metres, 8 tackle breaks. Yeah, I mentioned the 2 try assists, and he had a line break as well. But the thing is, John, and I've got to be honest about it because the media, I thought the commentators, and look, to be fair to the commentators, they may have been under instruction to sort of be very glowing in their praise of the star players because they were going out to that American audience. So that they may have been instructed to be this way. But I thought the commentators were really sycophantic towards Latrell. I mean, they made very little mention of the fact that he threw that pass that was intercepted by Saab to score that try. So that was a mistake that he made. He also made the mistake that came just before the Luke Brooks try at the end of the game. And his goal kicking was right off. Ruben Garriott kicked 6 from 6 for Manly. Latrell only kicked 2 from 5 for South. And I know the margin was 12 points, but if he had to kick those goals, it's a different game and there's a different dynamic to the game. And I think South would have been kept in the game for a lot longer if his goal kicking was better. So this is the thing, John. I think I've been very fair in my appraisal of Latrell's game. I've pointed out all the good things he did and all the bad things he did as well, but the media just seem to completely ignore the bad things he does. And they think that he walks on water. They ignore any mistakes he makes in their commentary, John, and their reporting of the game.
I wasn't really paying that much attention to the commentary, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was I was watching it with my friend, and we were basically we didn't even know what happened in the second game with the Spencer Leniu Ezra Mam thing that we'll get to. We actually didn't know. Well, I Latrell did some really amazing things.
Yes.
Even he threw off on one of his runs. He embarrassed Jake Trbojevic. Just embarrassed him by throwing him to the ground. He did that a couple of times as well, just monstrous runs that...
those 8 tackle breaks,
but his kicking was off. As you said, 2 out of 5 isn't good enough. Goal kicking wins a lot of games in rugby league. You have to have a goal kicker in form. It's first game of the year. It could be just a very simple correction. Next week he might kick 10 from 10.
Yeah, it wasn't a problem for Ruben Garriott kicking 6 from 6. But yeah, John, again, he did some great things. I think we've been very fair. As I said, the 2 try assists and scoring the try. But he also let that Jason Saab try in with the intercept. He made that mistake before the Brooks try. And his goal kicking was off, John. So I think it was a hot and cold game from Latrell. And we seem to only hear from the commentators that he was really good and they just ignored all the other stuff. But anyway... well done to Manly. Jason Saab, he scored 8 tries in his last 3 games, John. Last 3 NRL games. He also ran for 248 metres. Ruben Garriott racked up 214 metres as well, John. Tom Trbojevic had 28 runs for 221 metres. He also came up with 4 tackle breaks and a try assist. You mentioned his impact on the game, John. He just seems to give those around him a lot more time because he's so quick, and he'll either go himself or he'll move the ball onto someone else very quickly. So he just gives his teammates more time, and his teammates really grow around him, John.
Yeah, he was definitely, in the battles for who's the better number one. That was, I thought that game to open the season was really good because of that, the fullbacks actually, everyone's discussing why did they pick these specific teams and so on to go, but I thought that just for a season opener, a fit Tom Trbojevic versus a fit Latrell Mitchell was a really good thing to watch as a season opener. Yeah, and I think Tom Trbojevic went a long way to proving that he is the better number one if he can stay fit and should be the origin number. I mean, it's one game again, but that if that was to continue, if those two guys were to play like that every week. Latrell Mitchell had a lot more mistakes and stuff, but he had a massive impact on the game for the Rabbitohs.
Yes.
If those two guys continue on down that trajectory for the next 8 weeks, Tom Trbojevic is obviously the clear choice.
Yeah.
And Latrell would play centre for Origin, I guess.
Yeah, and I know James Tedesco was good for the Roosters as well, John. But we'll get to that a bit later. Yeah. So that'll make that battle sort of very interesting for that Blues number 1 jumper. Alex Johnston, he's scored 15 tries in 16 games against Manly now as well, John. So that's very impressive. Interestingly, John, Demetrio might be upset about this. The Rabbitohs didn't receive a penalty until the 72nd minute of the game.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
Yeah, so I'm sure he'll be looking into that, and he might want an expation out of Graham Annesley over that.
Maybe they it was they only ended up conceding. Manly only ended up conceding 1 penalty to the Rabbitohs 5. And there were very few ruck infringements. But yeah, it was kind of bizarre. That was one of the things that I noticed was there's just Rabbitohs just couldn't get a penalty.
I mean, to be fair, you'd have to go back and look at the game again. But to be fair, that may have been justified. That they may have. The Rabbitohs may have been a lot more ill-disciplined than Manly were. Manly may have been very disciplined. They may have only warranted their first penalty at the 72nd.
When was a time where you saw a penalty count that was one in a rugby league game? Manly only conceded one penalty. That's very rare for a team to only concede one penalty. Mm-hmm. No matter how disciplined they are, it was a bit bizarre. It's something that you don't often see. I'm not saying there should have been penalties. It was just kind of weird that Manly were able to stay that disciplined and not give away any penalties for 77 minutes, and that was the one that they conceded. Whereas the Rabbitohs got hit 5 times.
It's something that Demetrio will go back and look at. But I do think the better team got the win as well, John. I know Tom Trbojevic was denied a couple of times due to not grounding the ball correctly. I thought one of them he did lose the ball, but I thought another one actually thought he got it down. I thought he was hard done by. He should have been given one of those tries, I thought.
And it was the second half. The second half was the big difference. When they went in for half time, Rabbitohs were fully in it. It was pretty tight contests. They both had ring rust, so they weren't playing the best, but they were playing really well. Yeah. And then it seemed like they came out from the sheds at half time and DCE and Luke Brooks just clicked and went, all right, now we understand each other. This is what we're going to do. And then it was just rapid fire. 4 tries for Manly in the second half. Just rapid fire stuff, just constantly. And every time Manly got the ball, off the back of a couple of good forward runs, and then the halves, they just looked dangerous. They looked like they were going to score almost every set. And not because the Rabbitohs' defence was bad, because it wasn't. It was just because Manly was looking so good.
Mm. That's right, John. Like you said, the first round, we're not going to go too hard on the Rabbitohs, obviously. A lot of cobwebs are going to be there in the first round, and we obviously need more games to really get a good gauge on where these teams are really at. One other thing of interest, John, before the game was Latrell Mitchell saying he wanted the ground to be renamed Trelegiant Stadium. Yeah. So, it just doesn't look very good when your team gets beaten after making a comment like that. I know he played. Well, again, John, it was a hot and cold game from him, as I've detailed, but that was a bit of an odd.
Well,
comment,
if it had come off and he had been man of the match and dominated, then it would have looked like a good call. But unfortunately for him, Rabbitohs lost. And in the defence statistics, they're very telling. Actually, so I'm saying Rabbitohs weren't bad. The Manly were just too good for them, and so Rabbitohs had less missed tackles, 31 to 37. They actually made less tackles, 308 to 330. Same amount of ineffective tackles. So it was just that the Manly forwards laying that platform, giving the halves time, and then the back line for Manly were just able to capitalise, and that's it. They played a really good game of football.
Yeah, I don't want to be seen as going off too early on this, John. It is only round 1. But if the Rabbitohs, if their first round loss becomes, 2 or 3 losses in a row, I don't believe that pressure on Demetrio is going to be there right from the start, John, after the way they faded out last year. So they're going to need a win very soon, John, to keep the media off his back, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, they're playing the first few rounds of the season are, what is it called? They'll be playing the teams that came back from Vegas.
Yeah, so they'll be playing. So the Rabbitohs will play the Broncos and Manly will play the Roosters.
Yeah.
Obviously, they'll get next weekend off, having come back from Vegas, and then in round 2 the week after, they'll sort of switch opponents.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which makes it, I think that's fair to all clubs involved.
On the Thursday night, Rabbitohs will play Broncos. Yeah, because it's going to be a hard slog for them to come back and have to play. So it's it's funny because the second game of the season for both the teams are the losers versus the winners. So in both, there's no chance that you'll have two of the teams losing two and two of the teams winning two.
Yeah.
So someone's streak will be broken straight away in both examples, the losing and the winning streaks.
Yeah.
So
the loser out of that Broncos Rabbitohs game. I mean, that's the thing we talked about in the off-season, John. Was there an effect on and we'll get to the Broncos in a moment, but was there an effect on them with losing that grand final? Did it have a psychological effect? Again, if they lose 2 or 3 to start, those questions will start to be asked even more. Just like if the Rabbitohs lose 2 or 3 to start, Demetrio's going to be under pressure.
Absolutely,
and so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, John.
Yep. So in the end, Manly wins 36-24, and then straight after we had the Roosters Broncos match, which was another compelling match with a crap ton of talking points to come out of it, actually.
Yes.
Field goal issues, racism.
Yeah, we will get to the racism a bit later on in our news rundown, John. Well done to the Roosters winning 20-10. Manu, Pauga and Radley got the tries for the Roosters. Mariner and Walsh got the tries for the Broncos. Sam Walker kicked 4 from 4. Adam Reynolds 1 from 2. The Roosters led 8-4 at halftime. The crowd at that doubleheader, 40,746 as well, John, a very promising crowd. It was the Roosters' first round 1 win since 2021, John. So a bit of a mini drought for round 1 wins for the Roosters. I think that loss of Brandon Piakura to that failed HIA early, that seemed to hurt the Broncos a fair bit, John. That meant Pat Carrigan had to move to the edge as cover. I think they really struggled to break down that Roosters defence as well as a result of that. The Roosters made 4 line breaks to the Broncos 1 and had 43 tackle breaks in the win. And James Tedesco, got to give him credit, Johnny, made 204 run metres from 19 carries as well.
In that battle of the fullbacks, James Tedesco had it over Reece Walsh.
Yep.
So I think James Tedesco, again, it's only round 1.
Yes.
James Tedesco was able to play James Tedesco's game. Support, covering forward plays and backing up line breaks and stuff like that, instead of having to do hit-ups like a second rower. And that, you can see what it does. You know, he was actually fantastic. I don't know who the man of the match was, but he would have been close to it. That doesn't mean he's straight away in for Origin, because again, like you look at if you want to compare the 4 fullbacks from yesterday, which Jake Trbojevic was the best fullback on the ground.
Tom. Tom.
There's too many.
There are 3 Trbojeviches, so it's hard to keep up with them. That's a fair point, John. We're going to need a good 8 weeks to look at these Origin fullback contenders, and that's the thing. I don't think they should be. Again, Tedesco played well, he did, but I don't think they should be so soon to jump into locking him into that position. There are other options. Again, if Tom Trbojevic is fit and firing, he's a very real possibility of getting that jumper, John. Yeah,
go 8 weeks with exactly, if you lay out exactly what happened yesterday for the next 8 weeks, Tom Trbojevic is your...
And that's the thing, it's not as Tom Trbojevic, if you got Tedesco, Tom Trbojevic plays in the centres, but there's other options at centre if you put Tom Turbo at fullback. You know, you've got Stephen Crichton there as an option. You've got Latrell as well. If Latrell's firing, well, he's going to be there. So... This is the thing, John. I think sometimes they are too quick to just go, Tedesco, fullback, lock him in. Just see how things play out, because I think if Tom Turbo's fit, he's a better option at fullback. Anyway, we're probably jumping the gun talking about Origin.
Rugby League, you can't have
round 1. You just can't help but bring up State of Origin.
Can't have a week of Rugby League without who's going to be the State of Origin fullback.
Yeah.
For the Roosters, I thought Sam Walker actually had he didn't have a poor game, but I thought he played poorly. I think he doesn't run the ball enough. He was just really quick to pass, and he had a couple of really good things. He didn't do anything bad. It's just he just seems to not want to run the ball. Luke Keary, what was the thing? So Roosters. Sorry, I looked it up. It's Sam Walker had 10 runs, Luke Keary had 17. And I think that was if Sam Walker's serious, he should be running a lot more. But yeah, he didn't have a bad game. He didn't do anything bad. I just thought he was a bit weak. He was actually weak. And again, just Brandon Smith's passing from dummy half, his speed from the play of the ball is just way too slow. His best moments came when he was running onto a ball on an angle like a back rower. He was late to the ruck a few times as well, which is really poor form for a hooker. Yeah. But then he'd get a pass and run the ball on an angle, and it was really good. Yeah,
John. A couple of weeks ago when I was with Craig Gower here, he mentioned that he thinks that combination of Walker and Keary is the most important factor for the Roosters going into this year. But, as we've, John, as you alluded to there, a lot of, how they go is going to hinge a lot on the service they get from Smith at dummy half. If he's too slow to get the ball to them, which he has been guilty of in the past, well, that's really going to limit those two. So the impact Walker and Keary can have on the game really depends a lot on how quickly Smith gets the ball to them. But Craig Gower was sort of adamant that that's the most important factor for the Roosters going into this season is Walker and Keary, and a lot of it has to do with Smith's service to them out of dummy half as well, John. But all in all, I think the Roosters would be very pleased with that, John. We both thought that they underachieved last year. I certainly did. And even though I did tip the Broncos, John, I'm not really surprised that the Roosters got the win. I thought it was a game that could have gone their way, even though they were missing JWH and Dom Young. That's another thing we've got to keep in mind. They did that without JWH and Dom Young. So I think it really bodes well for their prospects this year, John. And I think this, and again, it's only one game, but we keep saying it's only round one, but that's all we've got to talk about.
Exactly.
We can only go on one game because there's only been one game.
It's got to be a matter of if it continues like this, and then next week we'll
I think certainly it's very early, but certainly the indications are there that last year they underachieved and this year they're going to correct that, John.
Yeah.
As I said, Piakura for the Broncos lasted only 4 minutes before he left for that HIA and he failed it, John. The Roosters have now won 6 of their last 8 against the Broncos, so they've got a really good record against the Broncos. That probably played a factor, especially considering as they were both, playing in a foreign environment and an unfamiliar environment. I think having a good record over a team is more of a factor in that situation than it otherwise would be. We will get to it later, John, but obviously Spencer Leniu was placed on report for that that alleged racism incident, which we'll go into detail on a little bit later on.
I know one of the things that came out of that game that I thought was quite important was Victor Radley conceded no penalties. So historically, Victor Radley has not just conceded penalties, he's basically JWH number 2, and he conceded 0 penalties. In the team stats, obviously the Roosters conceded more penalties because they always do.
And because they're happy to, John. That's just part of their shtick.
7-5. Overall the Roosters look good from in the Roosters preview, I said, and got hammered for it a little bit, said that the worry for me was the 1 and the 9, and the rest of the team, but it didn't matter because the rest of the team would be able to carry the slightly undone 1 and 9. The 1 was, and Tedesco could have the best year of his life. He had a great game, and I think Brandon Smith actually showed me that he's the weak link in the spine. as I said, Sam Walker, I don't think ran the ball enough, but he didn't have a bad game and he didn't do anything wrong. It's just he needs to look for more runs because I think I've said before, I watched a thing years ago where it was explained on the footy show, if your halves aren't, the first thing you should do when you get a ball in rugby league is run. If you can't run, then you pass. If you can't pass, then you kick. And if the halves aren't running when they should be running, it would mean that they aren't passing when they should be passing, and it would mean that they aren't kicking when they should be kicking. So if your halves aren't running, then that's not to say they should just run the ball over and over and over again. But there were moments in the match where, to me it looked like, Sam Walker should run the ball here because there's like broken play in front of him off a quick play the ball, and he didn't. He just quickly fed the ball on way too often. Roosters win, and if they keep winning, that's all they need to do. Then that's fine. Spencer Leniu playing at starting prop had a really good game as well. I think they said he's played 85 games in the NRL and he's only ever started 4 times in the commentary. And he showed that he could actually be a starting prop. He had 2 very good stints. Unfortunately, we'll get to the...
A lot of young players for the Broncos, John, and I wonder how much the environment maybe distracted those players going to Las Vegas. Obviously, I'm not saying these players were out until 3 or 4 a.m.
Apparently some of them were.
every morning, John. I sort of think, if you think about the circumstances around the game, going to Las Vegas, the excitement around that, I think in those circumstances you do favour the team with more older, wiser heads and more experience. They're not going to be as distracted by the occasion and by their surrounds as the younger players are. And I think maybe that played a factor as well, John.
And the Broncos, we discussed before the season, they've had a lot of changes for a team that made the grand final and almost won. More so than other teams that went well last year, so it's going to take a little bit of time for them to click. Adam Reynolds has been given a new contract to go 1 extra year, so 2025 will be his last year. That'll help because there's a lot of young guys in the Broncos and they need some older heads. Even their superstars like Reece Walsh are just 21 years of age. He's seen as a senior player and he's 21 years of age.
Yeah, they lost Farnworth, they lost Flegler, so it's not. But people assume that they go, they made the grand final last year, they'll be great again. Well, sometimes it doesn't always work out like that. You lose players and sometimes it doesn't take much for you to slip a bit. So, again, it's only round 1, but that's all we've got to talk about. Good start for the Roosters. The Broncos, a bit scratchy. We'll see how they go in the next couple of weeks, John, when they get back.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll play fellow losers, the Rabbitohs, not next week, the week after. Yes. Well, next week on Thursday. Mm-hmm. So that's our opening round. We can get into some news. We'll start with what happened before the game kicked off. So the Broncos announced a late change. Marty Tapau came into the starting lineup. And, of course, Corey Parker jumped onto the news and started hammering the Broncos for making this decision, questioning the changes to the forward pack for the opening game of the season. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the player that he replaced. It was a young player, but... Man, Corey Parker's really got it in for the Broncos. Really, just...
I mean, the thing is, John, I'm wary of being too critical of him in the sense that it's a real sort of bugbear of mine, these ex-players who are too nice. They won't give a strong opinion. They just praise everybody all the time and they're too scared to give a strong opinion. So there is that, John. I do appreciate the fact that he is willing to go out on a limb and speak his mind. That having been said, though, while it's entertaining for us as people who comment on the game, Corey Parker's got to start having a think about this a bit. I mean, he'll want to be, for example, John, their 20-year reunion for the 2006 Premiership, that's coming up in a couple of years. And he's going to have more reunions to go to for that down the track. Now, is he going to really want to go to these reunions as the guy who just bags the club at every opportunity? Is he going to be really warmly welcomed at the Broncos if he continues down this line? I don't know. Obviously, I don't know Corey Parker, John. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he doesn't. But I would have thought that would be something that you, as an ex-player who played in a premiership at the club, I would have thought that would be something you would want to bear in mind, John. If you keep criticising your former club publicly, you're going to alienate people at the club, not only the people who are there currently, but probably a lot of your former teammates as well. And these are the things that Corey Parker's going to have to start thinking about, John.
It was Xavier Willison that got replaced. And yeah, that's exactly right. Like, it's good when ex-players are openly critical when things need to be criticised. But it's actually bad in all walks of life, no matter what it is, if somebody in the media is just constantly hammering one subject, a negative about one subject, because it shows a bias that is there for whatever reason. And, you know, Corey Parker's an ex-Broncos player. It's a bit weird. It's just a bit weird how much he hammers the Broncos. He doesn't seem to say very much positive about them. And so if you're just being negative all the time, no matter the decision, then, you know, like, your opinion actually becomes less valid.
That's the thing. I think what a mistake that, you know, a number of ex-players and you know, supporters as well, and we're assuming that Corey Parker is still a Broncos supporter. I mean, he played with them his whole career. One trap they can often fall into, John, is they're overly critical of their own team, and they judge their own team very harshly, and they don't hold other teams to the same account that they hold their own team to. And I feel like Corey Parker's going down this path. I think Gordon Tallis sort of went down a similar well, he does go down a similar path, John. We've heard his constant criticisms of Adam Reynolds after that grand final. So that's another point to note, John. It's almost as if Corey Parker's going down this Mitchell Johnson path of just hammering his former team and the players in it. Mitchell Johnson, as we've talked about, has just given it to Steve Smith as well after his widely publicised column giving it to David Warner, which we enjoyed, John. But there is this theme. I mean, what Corey Parker, and I'll qualify it again, what Corey Parker and Mitchell Johnson are doing is entertaining for us as people who comment on sport.
Yeah.
But they need to think about, and again, they may have a certain personality where they just don't care about the consequences, John. But perhaps they need to sit back and think, look, do I want to do I want to go into my 50s and 60s and 70s continuing to bag my former team and alienating everybody involved in my former team?
Exactly. We'll see what he says now. Nothing's come out yet today, but I'm sure it will from Corey Parker.
Yes.
He'll probably, like, you know, say, see, I told you so.
One of those. And
we'll see what happens. More news. So the NRL is running a US Combine. We don't really have combines in Australia. It's for the NRL and the NRLW, in which, so the way it works is, like, they get a whole bunch of athletes to come and go through a bunch of tests, like sprints and catching balls and tackling and stuff, and then they can win a $80,000 development deal. They actually, I read a quote that said they don't actually expect to get any guys for the NRL, but they'll definitely find someone for the NRLW.
I think that was from Michael Carrianis on SC.
So it's a really cool thing, you know, because one thing that we've never seen in rugby league that I can ever remember is an American player in the NRL. You know, there are guys who qualified for America in the World Cup, and a few of them played, but they weren't American. They were guys like dudes that there were Australians who lived in America, or actually were like fully Aussie guys that just qualified through grandparents or whatever, you know. Yeah. So American heritage, but not actually like out of America. So it'd be cool to have one, because then the Americans that'll really get behind it.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Of course, we got that example of, you know, Collingwood star Mason Cox in the AFL, who's come out from America and done really well out here. But yeah, I did read those quotes from Carrianis, John, that you talked about. He does think that it's probably, more chance of getting some NRLW players as a result of this combine. And, that's a really good thing for the game, John. I think what the Americans, one thing that they need to bear in mind is if they're not good enough for the NFL, well, the NRL may be an alternative for them, and they can still, all right, the money is not as good in the NRL as it is in the NFL, but there's still a very good living to be had if they were to come out here and become an NRL player, if they don't make it as an NFL player. So perhaps they're setting this up in the hope of that, in attracting those NFL players who are still really gun athletes who don't quite make it over there. Well, the NRL presents those athletes potentially with an alternative, John.
Yeah, there's excuse me. You talk about the money, like the $1 million or $2 million contracts for guys who run on the field twice is pretty common in the NFL.
Yes.
So those guys have got to understand they're not going to come out here on $1 million contract. They're going to come out on an $80,000 or $100,000 or $250,000 contract. But there's NFL guys that they play from high school all the way up to college, and then don't make it into the NFL. Are huge bodies, really athletic. Yep. So they could actually make a big impact, especially in the forwards. Even the NFL players are massive. It's obviously a different body shape and different muscles and all that kind of stuff, but it'd be cool to see. And even if it's women in the NRLW, it'll be the same. You think about everybody knows the Australian players that play in the NBA. Everybody knows that there was those Aussie punters from the AFL and the NFL. And it's just if any American comes and plays rugby league in any way, then every American will know that there's an American playing in Australian rugby league. They might not know the name or ever watch a game, but they'll know. And that helps with branding. It helps with the existence. So it'd be really cool.
It's an interesting concept, John.
Combines are a funny thing, I think. It's a whole bunch of dudes come and do some tests.
Well, it's good that they're trying these things, John. You can't knock them for trying. Hopefully something comes out of it, John.
Yeah. And now we can move on to the actual biggest news story of the weekend. Spencer Leniu was accused of making a racist comment towards Ezra Mam during that Broncos Roosters game. He allegedly called him a monkey. There's audio of the ref dealing with it, and the NRL is currently investigating. Spencer Leniu basically admitted it after the match. In one of the interviews, he said, "Yeah, mate, whatever happens, it stays on the field. It's just stuff on the field or something like that."
Instead of denying it flat out.
Okay. But that's not boys will be boys type stuff.
No. There's no place for that, John.
Yeah. It's not, I like sledging as much as the next person. I love when they have good sledges. I always talk about I like Michael Ennis and Josh Reynolds and stuff like that. The way they would.
That was harmless, wasn't it?
Yeah, they never went across the lines that you just don't cross, which is things like racism, bigotry, attacking families and stuff like that. I watch combat sports, which is all sledging each other, and it's a lot of the time it's hilarious, but it's when Conor McGregor's all racist against Khabib Nurmagomedov. It's well, that's not right, mate. No. It's just not up. And then, of course, there's a heap of everybody's.
Yeah, there's a pile on, John. Just in another recent development to this story, John, it's come out that Broncos players reportedly confronted Leniu only hours after Ezra Mam made the allegation, John. Again, we should point out this is just an allegation at the moment. It's got to be properly investigated as well. We'll make that point too. Apparently, according to the Sydney Morning Herald, those players came face-to-face early in the morning with Katoni Staggs and Pat Carrigan getting in a heated exchange with Leniu. So there you go. The Roosters media manager removed Leniu from the situation, according to the report. The incident wasn't a physical one, John. But Phil Rothfield on the Big Sports Breakfast has said that Leniu could, quote, be facing a very long holiday, John. So that'll be interesting. I think the NRL are going to throw the book at Leniu if that's proven to be true, that allegation, John.
So what they'll do is there's a lot of audio out there there's lots of microphones all the time. So the NRL will go, the integrity unit will go and listen to all the audio. They'll also talk to the players that were near the incident at the time. If the allegations are proven to be true, I would expect them to throw the book at Leilua.
Yeah, 100%, John. Latrell Mitchell came out and weighed in on it, John. He said, and I quote, the NRL better deal with this shit. I don't think there was any suggestion that they weren't going to deal with it, John. I'm pretty sure that it's their top priority. I think they're going to deal with it.
There's any racism complaint needs to be backed up by the player that it's against, and they need to make a formal complaint. Mam made the formal complaint. So the NRL will deal with it.
Trent Robinson was asked about the incident, John, and he said that just because Mam is adamant about it, that does not necessarily mean he is, quote, right, unquote. So Trent Robinson's backing Leilua at the moment. So I guess, it's no great surprise given that, it's a new recruit and, a coach has got to be... Trent Robinson would be... Again, these are unproven allegations, John, but Trent Robinson, I think, privately would be seething at this. He'd be seething with Leilua if this is true, because Leniu's going to get... If it's proven to be true, Leniu's going to get a long suspension, John, and for them to have just recruited him, having high hopes for him, and if he's now going to be taking a lengthy stint on the sidelines, then Trent Robinson would be fuming, John.
Trent Robinson has to come out as his job and try and downplay it as much as possible without seeming like a bigot himself.
Yes.
But, what Leilua said, it's just all fun and games on the field.
Yeah, well, that's a load of rubbish, John.
Yeah, nobody thinks it's just all fun and games on the field.
No, not at all. And Jonathan Thurston said on Channel 9 after the game that he'd heard Mam was, quote, in tears. So we don't like to see that, John. Again, this matter will be thoroughly investigated and we will soon find out the outcome, I would have thought, John.
Man, it's quite... I think they should be even more harsh on him, as bad as it sounds, if the allegations are proven true, because it was during that Vegas showpiece, and racism is a massive topic in America.
Yes, that's a great point. Of all the sort of party that goes, only rugby league could manage this, John. As you say, Americans are very sensitive towards racism. So, you do roll your eyes and go, trust rugby league to go to America and have this incident happen on American soil.
Only in rugby league.
Not that obviously it's not permitted anywhere, John. But it's sort of especially. You have
to understand in America,
it's especially sensitive in America. This sort of thing.
They call America the home of racism. It's the focal point of it. Because they're so famous, Americans are so famous and stuff like that. There's kneeling during the national anthem came from Colin Kaepernick's being unhappy with the racist nature, systemic racism in police in America, and that has moved on to other sports codes, countries through that. And so it is like America is the centerpiece of all this stuff. Every country has racism, but America is the one that everyone knows about the most. And it's just, how do you deal with it? That's why I think the NRL should actually really, if it's proven to be true, tack on a couple of weeks, because it is worse when you're out in public, but even more public. This was our most important thing that we invested heaps of money in, and you made it.
Yeah, Phil Rothfield saying he's looking at a very long holiday. So I guess what are we sort of looking at here, John? 8, 10 weeks potentially?
I don't know. That's what I was actually going to ask you. I don't know.
I think because, as you just said, John, that'll be that the NRL I think will factor in the fact that it was in America. I think that factor is going to bump this suspension up. The NRL will be furious about this. They'll be furious. Peter V'landys and Andrew Abto they'll be seething that this has happened in their Las Vegas games. I think they'll absolutely, if these allegations are proven to be true, they'll absolutely throw the book at Leniu here. I'd suggest, John, that we would be potentially looking at an 8 to 10 week suspension.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. And then I go back to like last year where there was that biting thing that everyone thought it would be 8 weeks and it ended up being 2.
You know what, John? As much as I don't know what you think about it, but I think they'll be looking to treat this even more harshly than a biting incident, John.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, I think it's way worse than a biting incident, right? But biting, at the time, everybody in rugby league was like, the biting is the worst thing you can do in a tackle. You should never have to bite, and so he should get 8 weeks. And whoever it was ended up getting like 2 weeks. Like everybody went, what? He's like,
what's worse to happen in games played in America, John? A biting incident or a racism incident? I think a racism incident is worse.
So you would expect Spencer Leniu to get 8 weeks, but you can never trust the NRL. It could be anything. It could be his lengthy stint on the sideline, his 2 weeks, a public apology, and a $20,000 suspended fine. You never know, but I think it should be like that 6 to 8 to 10 weeks kind of thing, because it's just there's no place for it. Fans can get lifetime bans.
If you go to the ground and you say that, you're gone for life.
Yeah, you can get lifetime bans.
That's what's got to be kept in mind. That's what the NRL need to keep in mind when they're handing down this punishment, John, if it's proven to be true, these allegations.
I think we'll find out. We'll find out by the end of this week, apparently. Like, it's because it will be... Well, who knows with the suspensions these days. Yeah. But I
mean, they do, given that the two teams aren't playing this weekend, that gives them a little bit more time, but I think this will be the highest priority for the 100%. NRL when they get back from Vegas, John.
Meanwhile, in the stands, a few old duffers decided to biff on.
Yeah.
Guy wearing a Manly jersey got sucker punched. To my understanding, it was a bunch of Aussie dudes.
Yeah. Apparently, a Manly fan got escorted away with blood all over his face and on his right hand, John. So this is just, some unsavoury incidents here, John. That we're not really surprised about, are we?
No.
Unfortunately.
You don't often see violence in the stands, to be honest. When I went to the basketball recently, that was like the most exciting thing that happens. There was actually a blow up in the fans. That's like the third, maybe fourth time in my life that I've actually been to a sporting event and seen people actually having fights in the stands. But of course, when they go to America, rugby league fans can always do the worst possible things. There's footage of it all over the internet, like obviously mobile phone footage. It looks...
Yeah, you can go and look it up if you can.
Stupid. And like, oh God... Just seriously, man. There's really no need.
Yeah, just a very unsavoury incident, John. It's not clear what sparked the incident or what became of the guy in the light grey shirt throwing the punches, John. But there's a final video where the Manly fan is seen in a wheelchair being checked by medical personnel, like still clutching his Manly hat and scarf. In his hand with someone yelling, "Go Manly!" Seriously,
yeah, it's like a clown show actually. There's so many. Seriously, go watch. Everybody should check out all the different footages on the internet.
Yeah,
it's fully like a clown show.
And obviously a range of comments on social media, John. Some are targeting like the guy who appears the most sober and is throwing the punches. So. Very unsavoury, John. Just not a good look for the game on US soil, John.
Only rugby league.
Yes.
Well, it could happen in AFL, but then the AFL would shut down the reporting.
Yeah. They'd somehow get hold of the footage, John, and
exactly.
make sure it couldn't be posted on the internet.
But it's not just rugby league because America is kind of a scary place. And some reporters have been mentioning that there were some scary incidents while they were in Vegas. Australian reporters had some very scary experiences, which is pretty typical of Vegas if you've been to Vegas, to be honest.
Yeah, it seems apparently, John. Each of the four teams were given 10 security guards each, so the teams were well looked after from a security point of view. But one thing the NRL may have overlooked is a lack of security for the media, the reporters over there. There were 2 separate incidents, John, including a late night knife encounter in Los Angeles. Yeah, a TV presenter was about to do a live cross back to Australia after midnight, their time obviously to align with our time zone, John, in Santa Monica. And a man brandished a knife at the reporter, John. The intruder claimed the reporter had damaged his car, but when the Aussie journalist denied that was the case, he fled the scene immediately, John. The journalist was quoted telling News Corp saying, "It was the first time in my life that I thought I was going to die. The honest feeling was we were either going to be robbed or killed. I was genuinely worried about not surviving." And there was another incident, John, where a crew was filming at a similar time when 3 cars cornered them from 30 metres away after they'd set up on private property away from where the Broncos were staying after being told they were not allowed to do their live cross on the hotel premises. So as the scary situation unfolded with the cars leaving their engine running, the journalist started making phone calls to his employer, and it's believed the would-be attackers eventually backed off because they thought the police had been called. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, the reporter said, John. A true professional, he managed to still film the report even though the cars were still visible in the distance with their headlights on. I think the NRL have overlooked that, John, and there's this attitude, oh, stuff the media, who cares about the media? It wouldn't look too good on the NRL if something more serious had to happen to either of these reporters, John. I think the reporters should have been afforded more security on this trip.
Isn't it the reporters' employers' job to do it anyway as well?
Yeah, it's on them as well, John, but perhaps I would have thought the NRL should have checked in with the media outlets on that one.
Local correspondence and stuff like that. My assumption would be the media organisation gives the local correspondent a call and says, like, you know, what's the go? Like, what should we have security? Do reporters need to be protected? What's the typical go in America? Like, you know, we're going to be wandering around Vegas filming stuff. Is it all right? Like, what's the, give us the skinny. And then the local correspondent can say, yeah, everybody needs some security and you need a bunch of permits and don't film on casino
don't film at night. If you're going to do it, pre-record it, do it in the day, pre-record it and send it over and get them to replay it.
There's places in America that are really scary. That's one of the things, like, the Australians get really shell-shocked when they go to America, because you can cross the road. Honestly, you can cross the road, and you know they have the term like going to the wrong side of the tracks. In Australia, you can go to those scary suburbs, right? You know, like people are scared of Bankstown, for example. But when you're in an area of Bankstown, it's an area of Bankstown, and then it slowly degenerates into the scary sections. But literally in America, you cross the road and you go from like affluent business district to dudes trying to sell you crack. This happened to me in America, you know. Yeah. When I went to get a tattoo in San Francisco, people tried to sell me crack. And it was because when I was telling the tattoo parlor lady, she said, walk on the other side of the road. Like, on the other side, like, that's going to keep me safe. Because they have their code and all that stuff. Should watch The Wire. They talk about the code, you know. So, yeah, like, that's sort of like, surely you do your research and go, what's the skinny? Like, what's the go? How's it work, you know? And especially if you're in LA, which is a liberal state that's apparently like just totally deteriorated into Mad Max.
Or at least, you know, it serves as a warning for these media outlets who go back there next year, John. Don't be surprised if they beef up security next year when they go back. Yeah, you're right. The media outlets, it's probably more on them, but I would have thought it's in the NRL's interest for these reporters to be kept safe as well. It wouldn't be a good look on the NRL at all if something more serious had have happened to these reporters.
You would think the NRL would have called them and said, like, you're sending people? Okay, cool, because you're licensed to come and cover us. And how many? We're taking 10 security per team. How many securities are you taking? Yeah,
at least, I mean, all right. Maybe for the media, you're not going to have as much security as you would for the whole teams, but maybe, you know, employ a security guard for each media outlet, you know, so they can have one something there like while they're doing their live cross or whatever it is.
Vegas at night is a scary place, man.
Well, at least this serves as a warning. I mean, a problem with a lot of media outlets, John, is a lot of them are cost-cutting at the moment, and they just... a lot of them had just refused to spend the extra money on something like that, on security for their reporters. But it's a lot better to fork out money on security than have something serious happen to your
You
reporter.
get stabbed by a weirdo on the street in Santa Monica.
Surely these big cashed up media outlets could afford security for their reporters, John.
Still in Vegas. It's all about Vegas.
Yes, big Vegas.
The two most famous American Australians who were meant to go and watch their teams play didn't go.
Yeah, they didn't go, John. Apparently, Hugh Jackman withdrew from the event. He was expected to attend to watch his Manly Sea Eagles do battle with the Rabbitohs. Apparently, he pulled out citing personal reasons. It was hoped that he'd follow Russell Crowe's lead in promoting the game, John. Obviously, we know about Russell Crowe doing that voiceover for that ad that went on American television screens explaining the game to them. So Hugh Jackman didn't attend due to personal reasons. Russell Crowe didn't attend either.
That's bizarre. They must not be very big fans.
Yeah, he turned down the chance to be in attendance, John, Russell Crowe. So there you go.
They must seriously. I know Russell Crowe bought Souths because he's such a big fan, but he mustn't be that big a fan. How often does he get to games living in America? The one time he could go to a game. Yeah, the one time. Just the one time.
Right. John, Gus Worland was quoted as explaining why Hugh Jackman was absent. John, Gus Worland's friends with Hugh Jackman. He makes sure he lets everyone know that at every opportunity as well, John, that he's friends with Hugh Jackman. But he explained why that Jackman wouldn't be in attendance due to unforeseen circumstances. So. Yeah, look, we don't know what those circumstances are, John, so I'm wary of being, it could have been, something serious which resulted in him not attending, so I'm wary of being too critical. But yeah, I would definitely have thought Russell Crowe would have been there, John.
That's bizarre. But we didn't get any flashes to famous people, so Americans...
you don't have time in a game of rugby league because there's a lot happening.
Americans were probably quite shocked.
With American football, you get plenty of time to flash to the celebrities, although there were bunker referrals and captain's challenges, which may have presented that opportunity, John. But yeah, we got to say it is a bit disappointing that we don't know the whole circumstances, so we're wary of that. But it would have been nice to have those two in attendance, John.
Yeah. So now we're going to do, and honestly, guys, it's just our opinion.
Yes.
It is just our opinion. We're going to review how the US media covered the Las Vegas NRL games and how the US reacted.
Yes. So, John, I'm not sure if you saw the news, but there was overtime in a college basketball game resulted in the screening of the NRL doubleheader being delayed in America. They had to move it to Fox Sports 2. It was meant to be on Fox Sports 1 in the US. But yeah, that college basketball game ran overtime. It was meant to be on the network's primary channel, Fox Sports 1. But the game between Xavier and Georgetown went beyond 9:30 p.m. Eastern time in America. That meant a delay, although at least they put it on Fox Sports 2, John, until that game finished. So the main channel didn't join the action until 18 minutes in. That was just in time to see Jason Saab streaking down the touchline. As I said before, Lachlan Ilias making that brilliant ankle tap on him, John.
It was that's fair. There's a massive amount of gambling money in basketball and all college level things, and that happens here. I've contacted KO before because UFC Fight Night was supposed to start, and it didn't because some car racing or something had gone longer than it was meant to be. That happens. It's just something that happens. At least in America, or in this case, they were able to bump it to another channel until the game finished. For me, I got nothing. That was what KO said. You'll just have to wait. That was it. You just have to wait. It was an ESPN thing, because KO has the rights to stream ESPN and UFC.
That's an issue. You got KO and you don't see the game until 18 minutes in.
And so, I actually had people at my house to watch it. And we're sitting there watching car racing with no other option. And that was why I subscribed to UFC Fight Pass.
Yeah,
you know, like. So I can understand. At least they had a way to cut it over. They were never going to care about rugby league more than they cared about even college basketball. They just
of course.
So
of course, yeah, but the NRL would have been filthy that occurred, John. I mean, it happened to go into overtime and they got delayed 18 minutes on the main channel. They just would have thought, oh, that's just our luck to have a college basketball game go into overtime. I mean, overtime in basketball games, it doesn't happen very often, John. I mean, for a basketball game to end in a draw, it's very rare. I mean, it's a lot more likely for, you know, a baseball game to go into... It's a lot more likely for a baseball game for the score to be level after the 9 innings than for a basketball game to be level at the end of the game. So they would have thought, look, just our luck on that one, John. But anyway, John, I had a bit of a look... I sort of looked around a bit on some, you know, US websites. I looked on the American Fox Sports website. I couldn't see any reports on there. I looked on Las Vegas newspaper websites, John. I found one report. It was by a lady by the name of Madeline Carter in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. She did a 4-paragraph report on the game, John. I didn't find anything on the other Las Vegas newspaper websites. There was an article done in the New York Post, though, John, by Mark Canizzaro. And he opened his article by saying, "Okay, Aussies, I'm hooked." So that was some good press for the NRL, John. foxsports.com.au, the Australian Fox Sports website. They spoke to some Americans about the game, John. They spoke to a security guard there who said the NRL is, quote, way better than the NFL because, quote, it's faster and they work together, not individually. There was also a Brooklyn-based writer who decided to blog the game. John admitted that he didn't have much knowledge watching the sport, but he went on to compare it to human cockfighting. As Lachlan Croker was left bloodied by a collision, while Manly's Jackson Paulo also required treatment. His name was David Lengel, this writer. And he was quoted as saying, "Another player is bleeding. Is this normal? But they play on. Jesus," he said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a bit of a look at the media coverage of the game, John. Obviously, look, I'll be honest, John, there's a few articles on it, but I was sort of hoping for... I would have thought you would have got an article on the Fox Sports US website, given that, you know... given Lachlan Murdoch, I mean, Lachlan Murdoch was one celebrity who was in the crowd, John. They put the camera on him. But given that his clout, obviously with Fox in America, I would have thought he would have been able to organise a bit more coverage on that US Fox Sports website as well, John.
Yeah, I think if they had any expectation of ever getting anything, then it's a massive failure. But I don't think anybody had any expectation. Anyone who knows American sports, you look at the Fox Sports Australia website, okay, and it covers like every sport because Australia is like sport mad, and if the NFL, when the NFL did bring some teams here, I believe, to play some actual season games years ago, and it was all over Fox Sports and here and on the TV and covered everywhere, right? But America fully only cares about 3 games, man. Like, they just don't care about anything else, and they care deeply about it from high school level all the way up to the top grade. You can see footage and stuff like that of some high school NFL, baseball and basketball games that have sold out stadiums, college ones and the top level all the way through. I think like 5 or 6 articles is actually quite an achievement to break through that, to be honest. Because like American sports is, and they have games every night. Like, they have sport every night in America, 7 days a week, and they have. We have the 17 teams in the NRL, and they have they have multiple conferences You know, like basically multiple competitions that all merge together in baseball for the World Series and things. There's so much sport, so many teams, so much to report, and no big media organisation is going to go, oh, just don't worry about that baseball match that's happening on the weekend and cover this weird rugby league thing that's happening, because they just don't have the time or the resources, because there is so much sport and so many teams and so many games, stuff like that. Basketball, they play like best of 7 and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the Major League Baseball, John, the season consists of 162 games for each of the 30 teams.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
So you've got games on every night there. And,
every night.
And so you've got to try and break through that. And that's an established sport that Americans are rusted on with.
And then,
I've talked before about tennis as well, John. Even a sport like that's got a long history in America, they only care about the superstar American players like Serena Williams, or before her or alongside her like Andy Roddick, and before both of those players, you know, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi. That if there's not an American doing really well in tennis, John, they don't even care about that, let alone a sport that they're completely unfamiliar with.
They fully don't. And that's one of the things as Americans tell me, like, they don't get a lot of sport. Like, you know, in Australia, we have sports news, the sports news section in the on the radio, on the TV. So, like, you know, I'm driving to work this morning, and it's like Natasha Belling does the news, and then, you know, coming up next is sport, and they gave you the update of the 2 games, and then talked about like Ezra Mam, Spencer Leniu, all this kind of thing. I've had Americans tell me, like, in the sports section of news and stuff like that in most American places, like, they don't have time even for that stuff, so they don't get a lot of reports about sports stars and what happens in, like, off the field and stuff like that, because they've got to get through so many match updates and stuff like that, injury updates. Talk about the 160 games or whatever. Like, there's so many players on a baseball team, so many people are injured and all that kind of thing. So they just don't have time. And so to get the NRL in the New York Post is pretty good. But I just think it wasn't at any point the intention, really. Like, some people are conflating the whole thing about, they went there to go and break into this American market, and they're going to try and get 1% of the American market. But I don't think that was ever the intention. I think it's, like I said last week, it's solely about betting. As long as they can because there's heaps of money in esports and stuff like that. Like, esports are pretty new. They broke in. There's heaps of gambling money in esports and things. They broke in because even though Australia is a bet mad nation, per capita we bet more money per person than any other country in the world. There's way, way, way more betting revenue on a much wider variety of stuff in America. And they have limited states where gambling is legal, and then there's some federal thing going on where they're going to unlock it for every state, but then each state can, like, say, oh, but we're still not unlocking it. But that would mean that you can gamble on out of state things or something. I don't really know. I don't care about American politics enough to know the ins and outs of the whole thing. But it's solely, like, it's so coincidental when all this is happening, and in Australia we're trying to restrict gambling in sports, that suddenly NRL is going to America. AFL is never going to be able to go to America and try and break in, because there's no AFL in America at all. You know, there is 0 AFL teams in America. I'm making that up, but I'm taking a safe assumption. But we know, like, at Utah, there's at least 4 rugby league teams, and America competed in the Rugby League World Cup and so on and so forth. So they don't need to break through and become a popular sport, and they don't need media coverage to do that. All they need to do is get on some bookmaker websites and start generating some revenue.
Yeah, so it's just about gaining enough familiarity to get Americans to bet on it, and earn revenue out of the gambling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of may as well merge this next topic with what we're talking about now, John. It really plays into what we're talking about now. Just if we've got any final thoughts on this Las Vegas experiment. Well, we've just touched on it. It's about the gambling. I just think if you were to really want to cut through one double header, like once a year for 5 years, there's just not that. There's just no momentum with that. You do it once, you have 2 games, and then you disappear and come back to Australia, and then you're sort of forgotten about by the American public. There's just no momentum with that approach. They'll quickly forget the game and move on. I think that the US people, they're not really... I just don't think they're going to care about the Australian teams either. They're not going to have an attachment to Australian teams. Instead of thinking about buying the Super League in the UK, if they were serious about it, maybe they should try and look at, starting their own league in the US and putting the money that way. Start off with a Las Vegas team. Obviously, they've identified the Las Vegas as a market that they can, potentially gain some traction in. There's an opening there. I think they did think about LA, but the market's just too saturated in LA. So they've gone down the Las Vegas path. They could play in the big stadiums like Allegiant Stadium, outside of the NFL season. Work out potentially which other markets are the best markets for a rugby league team, markets that don't have, like Las Vegas, where there's an opportunity, and, start with a 4 or 6 team competition and grow it from there, John.
Well, I would think that they could do both. They should buy the Super League. And I think
if you can do both, great. Yeah.
I don't know, you're right. It's coming and dropping into Las Vegas and then flying out and then waiting till next year to go again is not gonna ever grow much. But all they really got to do is get on some bookmaker sites with some bet offers and stuff like that, and gamblers will follow the bet offers. So if they can do that and start generating revenue, then they can build more into the United States. I like the fact that they're going, and apparently the Roosters have already volunteered to go again next year. I think Craig Gower said, who's going next year? What's happening next year? That's what everybody really wants to know. We want some clarity about what's happening next year. My mate said to me yesterday, if they're going again next year, I'm going. That it's good for... Obviously, Vegas doesn't need the NRL to bring them tourism. I don't think they care about that little bit of pile of money. That it's not Taylor Swift bringing $140 million into New South Wales or anything like that. So it's a good experiment. I'll reserve full judgment until the next couple of years. I just like to see, like I said, they can get some American players to play in Australian Rugby League. That will be a thing that gets a little bit more interest, and getting that interest will generate more bet revenue. And that's all that really matters. I know a lot of people are anti-gambling revenue in sports, but I said last week, that money is what filters down to juniors. That's where the money for juniors comes, actually. Yeah. The TV deal is all well and good, but the majority of money in sports in most of the world is in gambling.
And that's the thing. We talked about it a podcast or 2 ago, John, that there are examples of people who have had real problems with gambling, but once you take the gambling revenue away, you'd be amazed how many people lose their jobs. Yeah. So for every action, there's a reaction. You got to be very careful when you make seemingly, bold moral statements like saying, "Oh, no more gambling, no more gambling." Well, hang on, there'd be some sort of a flow-on effect to
That's a massive issue. One of the things I thought was really funny yesterday was Manly running around with the PointsBet as their major jersey sponsor. PointsBet
collapsed in America.
Yeah. They lost $30 million or something trying to open in America. I thought it was, but that's just because there is actual mafia type thing in America with betting. You can't get in there. It's really hard to break in as an organisation as a bookmaker, not as a sporting organisation. Like I said, esports is massive. There's massive amounts of money that goes on esports. Massive amounts. Yeah.
One other thing I was just going to add, John, before we wrap up our Vegas chat was. Obviously those hopes that, Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce and Patrick Mahomes would be there. Obviously they didn't eventuate, John, unfortunately. So, unfortunately on that front, we've got to point it out, the celebrity presence that was hoped didn't eventuate there, John.
I would
it's
think
unfortunate.
They should correct that for next year. That's what the NRL will now do is they'll sit down and they'll conduct a review. But that's what you have to do. It's not a stupid, useless review that you do. Where did we go wrong?
It's a new thing.
What did we do right? What can we do to make it even bigger and better next year? And one of the things they should highlight is let's get some celebrities on board, celebrity endorsements on board. Actually,
if you have to pay them to go,
pay the celebrities to endorse. There's like some payment app in America that was featured on the Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and the rumor was they paid $20 million to be on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and then became super popular. Like that's how America works.
So that's the thing. What was it? $700 million in revenue they announced, I believe. Volandes announced that,
and $60 million profit. Surely
you can. Or if all you got to do is pay people to go. Surely they got the money to do that, John.
Exactly.
They should have looked at paying, a Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes to be there in the stands. Even some other celebrities, John, just to drum up, some interest.
They could have done. One of the things that I thought would have been good was would have been a musical act between the two games, like a Super Bowl halftime show. They could have done something like that as well.
That's another point to make, John. I would have had. I think there needed to be more of a break between the two games. Give it a half hour or 45 minutes between the games to have an entertainment act.
And Americans will stay there forever. They watch the Super Bowl for 8 hours.
Exactly.
They'll stay there forever.
Yeah, I think. As rusted on league fans as we are, John, I think. We just, watching the two games back to back like that, it's a lot of footy to watch in a short amount of time. I think it would have been nice to have that sort of 45-minute interval between the games.
Get Beyonce to play or something, This is the thing. Like they could do
if you pay people enough money, they'll do anything.
Yeah, and then that way you will get more growth. Anyway, that's honestly, guys, it's just our opinion for the week. Talking about NRL Las Vegas. I'm sure we're going to forget about it next week once the footy is actually on and running.
Yeah.
Just to finish, we've got a couple more things to finish up with Rugby League. Angus Crichton, who was dropped and didn't play, opened up on his mental health battle, revealing he's been diagnosed with bipolar after everything that happened in the off-season. It was last year, right?
So it was after the 2022 Rugby League World Cup.
The year before, yeah. The year before, when he played for Scotland or something, and then basically had a mental breakdown while staying on holidays in Europe. There was the whole thing about how they suspected he'd taken mushrooms and gone on a drinking spree, but they actually did drug tests on him, and he came up clean.
Well, it was actually he played for Australia in that World Cup. That's
he stayed in Scotland or something else.
Yeah. He stayed over there after. So I mean, we all heard those sort of vicious rumours and innuendo, and he's sort of he's come out and addressed those publicly. There was one rumour that he rocked up to training in a Souths jersey, and he said that didn't happen. He said that was among some of the most far-fetched things. That was his quote. Yeah, he was in France, and he had to be restrained and taken to a mental facility because of a manic episode, which French police believe was due to a reaction to a particular substance. So, as he said, he's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But he said it had nothing to do with drugs or alcohol, though.
Yeah, he'd been in Amsterdam and stuff like that, and then he'd gone to France, and then that was it. And then I read it this morning. I can't believe I forgot everything. But being in Amsterdam, and then he went to France, and then his people he was staying with contacted his family and said something's wrong with him. He's acting all weird. And then in France, when you put on a hold, you're not allowed to be released and to leave the country unless you get medical diagnosis, medical permission. So his parents had to fly over there, pick him up. They did a toxicology report, and it all came up clean. And it ended up, he's being diagnosed with bipolar, which is a very difficult thing to deal with for not just the people who suffer from it, but also the family and friends around them.
I think he's done the right thing, John, by addressing this publicly. You really nip it in the bud when you do that. If he hadn't have addressed it publicly, those of us who heard the rumours would have had that in the back of our mind. But now that he's got out on the front foot with it, addressed it, he said that these things didn't happen, these far-fetched things he's talking about. I think that's really good because now everybody goes, oh, he's addressed it, and you move on from it.
Yeah.
It's a really good It's a really good sort of PR strategy on his part, I think, getting on the front foot with it, being honest about it, coming, I guess, detailing his diagnosis with bipolar disorder, going through each thing and, dismissing the things that never happen. I think well done to Angus Crichton on this one. I think it's a very smart move on his part.
And then finally, new signing Luciano Leilua has been handed a 2-game ban for hiding a drink driving charge.
Yeah, so it's not a good start at his new club, John. You must be pretty filthy about it as a Dragons supporter.
Apparently, he got done drink driving when he was in North Queensland. Went to the Dragons without telling them. Didn't inform the NRL Integrity Unit and was pinged by a reporter who was covering the courthouse and saw Luciano Leilua arrive at like 9 in the morning, because when you go to court, everyone's booking is at 9 in the morning. He arrived at 9 in the morning and went, "Oi, that's Luciano Leilua. What's he doing here?" And it ended up he'd been done for a drink driving charge a few weeks before. So he seems to have thought that he was going to never tell anyone.
I feel bad for you, John. You're all kitted out in your nice Dragons jersey today. You're looking forward to the season. My daughter picked it for me. You got new season hope that we all have as fans of struggling clubs. And you got to deal with this Luciano Leilua 2-game ban for hiding a drink driving charge. That's just no way to start with your new club.
If he hadn't hit it, he would have just copped a fine. But he's been suspended for 2 games for hiding the drink driving charge.
You got to own these things.
Yeah.
You got to own it.
It was the worst part about it is it was when he was at North Queensland, so he should have been suspended for 2 games at North Queensland. But then he's coming down to the Dragons, who I expect to get the spoon. And just on we go.
It's what they say, John. It's never the crime, it's the cover-up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just so frustrating when I was reading this. It just gets worse and worse and worse. Rocked up to court in thongs.
And they're just not a team that can... again, a lot of people have got them, bottom 4. You've got them finishing last. I've got them bottom 4. They're just not a team that can afford this. They need everything to be going right for them to get the absolute best out of themselves. And this is a setback that the new coach, Shane Flanagan, could well have done without, John.
Detracted from the fact that Ben Hunt has now revealed he's happy to stay at the Dragons. Because Flanagan's spoken to him and convinced him and everything, and wants to see out his contract and sees good things for the club and all that kind of thing. No, Luciano Leilua hit a drink driving charge. Screws over the Dragons. Yeah, so this is 2 signings in a row that the Dragons have done where there's post signing something bad's happening.
So he's going to miss the games against the Titans and the Dolphins before a likely return against North Queensland in round 3, John.
Well, that couldn't be better. That's he couldn't write that.
His former club, yes.
That's it for Rugby League for the week. We'll have more on Thursday, most definitely, because it's Rugby League and Rugby League is in full swing.
We'll be previewing the other 6 games of round 1, John.
On to a little bit of cricket news. Australia has won the first test against New Zealand in New Zealand.
Yes.
No New Zealand cricket fans are on my social saying anything on the back of the GOAT, Nathan Lyon.
Yeah, and Cameron Green, John, made 174 not out in the first innings. You mentioned Nathan Lyon taking 10 wickets for the match.
So small, only half the wickets.
so he's now got 527 wickets, John. He's number 3 on the list of all-time wicket takers by Australians. Glenn McGrath is number 2 on 563. So Nathan Lyon only 36 behind McGrath now, John, and obviously Shane Warne's on top with 708. So perhaps we are looking at a scenario where Nathan Lyon may be able to chase down Shane Warne's 708 wickets now, John. I know he's 36 years of age, but he's a finger spinner. He could play till he's 40, John. If he plays till he's 40, I think he will chase Shane Warne down.
there's now rumblings of him staying around to the 2027 Ashes series.
It's
he only needs
entirely
four
possible.
more tests to get to number 2
And,
at this rate.
that's the thing, John. He's clearly our best spinner at test level. There's nobody else knocking on the door, so I don't see any reason why Nathan Lyon can't play till he's 40 if he wants to. Yeah, Australia winning that first test by 172 runs, John.
What was New Zealand's first innings total? I'd just like to hear it said.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have to just look up the quick info on that one, John. So New Zealand made 179 and 196. Australia making 383 and 164. Australia batted first after they were sent in by New Zealand there in Wellington.
How about that? 179 in a test. All out for 179.
Yeah.
It's not even a 50, an ODI.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not
Beautiful.
great, John.
That's a thing of beauty.
I just wanted to point out that partnership by Cameron Green and Josh Hazlewood in that first innings, that 10th wicket partnership was really good, John.
Yeah, Australia actually looked done, to be honest. I was watching the score all day and they were in trouble.
Well, they put on 116. That's the highest 10th wicket partnership against New Zealand in Test history, John. So that was a really good effort by those two. It was Cameron Green's best Test score, trumping his 114 last year against India. Josh Hazlewood made 22. That betters Glenn McGrath's 14 as the best score by an Australian, number 11 in New Zealand.
That's cute.
That second and final test, John, in this joke 2-test series begins on Friday in Christchurch, John. Australia have a 1-0 lead there, John.
Yes, New Zealand won the toss and opted to bowl. And that looked like they had made the right decision because Australia was done and dusted with Smith out for 31, Khawaja out for 33, Labuschagne out for 1. Cameron Green comes in, Head out for 1, Mitch Marsh did okay on 40, Kerry out for 10, Stark out for 9, Cummins out for 16, Nathan Lyon out for 5.
Nathan Lyon did well in the... it was one of the innings. Nathan Lyon did well with the bat, John.
Yeah. And then, but Cameron Green just plonked away, just kept going. 174 puts him up to 383, which still didn't look the best. You know, I was like, oh, this is a bit dangerous. But then, New Zealand 179. Only two players got over 40 runs, Glenn Phillips and Matt Henry.
That was the second innings, was it, where Lyon got right? My crick info is just broken down for me here, John. I can't get onto it.
Nathan Lyon, 41.
In the second innings?
Yeah, he batted at 4, right?
Yeah, came in as the night watchman, yeah. John, just having a bit of a look here. Well done to Cameron Green. That was a great effort. We mentioned Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne there before, John.
Yeah,
we'll just segue into that.
Guys.
So those two are struggling at the moment, John.
Steve Smith, 31 and 0.
Yep.
2 batting innings, 31 and 0.
Yeah,
Marnus Labuschagne, 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's just no good, is it, John? And, Labuschagne, that's particularly concerning, John. He's only made 1 century in his last 37 test innings, and he's only passed 50 on 6 occasions during that time. Only passed 50 on 6 occasions in 37 innings, John. That's really worrying.
Yeah.
You mentioned 1 and 2 in this game, John. That's no good. His test average has dropped from 60.82 to under 50 in just 12 months, John. Some really interesting quotes from Gerard Whateley, the cricket commentator on SEN Radio, John. He says, Labuschagne is totally lost. He's lost in his own head. All the things he spoke about coming into the test match, he didn't do any of them. He was scratching around his mark. You couldn't see him scoring, Whateley said. He added, there are flaws in his game that will torture him because he speaks about being the perfectionist, but he needs the shrink's couch at the moment to find his way through it. Once he gets in the middle, he is just consumed by it. All his idiosyncrasies are swallowing up the stroke player that we have seen where he's been at his best, John.
And so he faced 27 balls in the first innings for 1 run. It's a terrible strike rate. Of 3.70. And then in the second innings, he faced 13 balls for 2, which is a much better strike rate of 15, but he scored 2. He scored 2.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll sit down at the end of this series. We'll have a bit of a closer look at Smith's and Labuschagne's numbers. We'll give him another test and see how they go. But Steve Smith, it's been worrying form for some time now for him as well. And, you know, I'm willing to cut him a bit of slack. He's really put himself out with moving up, deciding to move up from number 4 to opening. John, opening's a much tougher gig, obviously. As an opener, you're facing the bowlers when they're at their freshest. You're facing the new ball as an opener. You're also batting on the pitch where if you're batting first, you're batting when the pitch is doing its most if you're batting as an opener. So Steve Smith's really put the team first here with this decision and hasn't put himself first. It's an unselfish move, but I don't know whether it's in his best interest, John. Apart from that 90 he made in that test match where they lost to the West Indies, he's really struggled as an opener so far. But anyway, we'll see how he goes in the second test, John.
We can do next week, and we might get a guest in to discuss Steve Smith and...
Yeah, I think at the end of the test series against New Zealand, it would be a good idea, John.
It finishes on Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Yeah, it starts on Friday in Christchurch.
Finishes
that
up on
second
Tuesday.
test.
Yeah, so we'll look at something. I'll try and organise that.
I just wanted to touch on one thing before we move on from cricket, if I can, John. I mentioned Shane Warne before, his 708 test wickets, the top wicket taker for Australia of all time, number 2 on the all-time list. I think he's still number 2. I don't think Jimmy Anderson's gone past him yet. I think if Anderson had gone past him, we would have heard about it. No. But Anderson's pretty close to him. Just wanted to touch on, John, it's actually 2 years today since Shane Warne passed away. Yeah, it is. So, John, I just wanted to point that out. I'll be having a quiet beer for the great man later on tonight when I have my dinner. So I just wanted to point that out. Shane Warne's family... in our thoughts today on his 2-year anniversary, John.
We miss Shane Warne.
Yes.
So that's it for cricket. We can just quickly discuss some combat sports. Jake Paul, boxer extraordinaire, fought yesterday. 42nd professional boxer ever. So last time he fought a professional boxer, it was Tommy Fury. He's notorious for just fighting retired ex-MMA fighters. He's fought Tommy Fury and lost, so he decided to take on another professional boxer. He took on Ryan Bourland, who has a record of, prior to the event, 17-2. His last fight was in 2017.
Yep.
So he was actually marked as an inactive boxer, and he lists his employment on his LinkedIn as part-time Uber driver. Jake Paul managed to TKO him in round 1, 2 minutes 37, and now Jake Paul is going on about how this proves he is a professional boxer because he's beaten a professional boxer now. An inactive, part-time Uber driver.
Is that the secret to becoming famous, John? Just fight against Uber drivers? That's out of the ridiculous. Anthony Mundine playbook, isn't it? Fighting pub bouncers.
That's not one of those nonsense fight circuses. That's just Jake Paul actually fully bragging about beating up some guy who hasn't had a fight in 5 years.
Yeah, who's an Uber driver.
Uber driver. Absolutely ridiculous. That is a joke, and Jake Paul should really retire from boxing and stop. Just stop. Just stop. Just stop.
You're not a fan of the two Pauls, are you, John?
No, they're both not good boxers, and Jake Paul fights retired MMA fighters. MMA fighters aren't boxers. The MMA fighters are massively different. Part of their game is kicks, takedowns, submissions, wrestling. Boxing is like a whole other thing.
Off the top of your head, what do you think they'd be their net worth would be, Logan and Jake Paul?
It's in the $100 million type thing. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's amazing the amount of money they've made out of it, John.
This stupid YouTube crap. Idiots. They both, yeah. Like I said before, ages ago, I'm okay with the fight circuses, but this one is he's trying to establish himself as a professional boxer and prove he's a professional boxer. He's fought one professional boxer and one inactive part-time Uber driver. And then all the rest are retired MMA fighters. That's just nonsense. But yeah, he won 2 minutes 37 into the first round. On to other sports.
Yeah.
The soccer always gives us some exciting times. I was watching this on the internet. So it's been labelled on all of the internet as police overstepping their hand, but the police ejected 14 people for fighting and lighting flares from the Wanderers versus Sydney FC.
Yeah, the Sydney Derby in the A-League, yep.
Of course, TikTok has got blown up and gone on about how it's an overreaction. And in protest, the rest of the Wanderers bunker thingy, whatever it is, fan bay, walked out.
Yeah, it's called the Red and Black Block, John. Yeah, it was walked out on Saturday night at Combank Stadium, that game.
Who won? I might look it up.
I think Sydney FC would have won, John, if the Wanderers fans wouldn't have been walking out if they were winning that game. So
4-1 Sydney.
Yeah, that's the thing, John. Often fans who do a walkout, often they'll use something as an excuse to walk out of a game they're getting beaten in. And I think that may be happening here. But yeah, there were flares being lit. There was fighting. Just an unsavoury incidents here, John, in the Sydney Derby.
These soccer fans will often go on about how the police are overreacting, and then like you see the footage and they're like, why are the police overreacting? Because you're lighting flares and fighting. Don't light flares. The police won't kick you out. Flares are dangerous and illegal.
Yeah.
When you buy a ticket to a sporting event, there's a terms and conditions box, and one of the conditions at in all of the sports things is do not bring flares. If you bring flares, you'll get kicked out. And what do? They brought flares. One of the other conditions is do not fight. If you fight, you'll get kicked out. And what do? They fought. It's not a police overreaction.
I suspect the fact they were getting beaten had a lot to do with it, John. If they had been, you mentioned they lost that game 4-1.
4-1.
If they had won 4-1, I think I don't think the supporters walk out if they were having a good night, John.
They scored their one goal in the 72nd minute.
So they were well beaten.
What's it? Sydney FC scored their fourth goal in the 59th minute. So they were actually up 4-0 when Wanderers fans had a idiocy thing. Like, man, that's what gives soccer a bad name. You know, it's why it's not one of the reasons why parents don't want their kids to go to games and stuff like that, because stuff like that. And they go on about the police heavy-handed tactics. Man, when I go to a match, I want the police to kick you out if you're fighting and lighting flares. I fully do. I've been at a match at a rugby league match where someone lit flares and threw them on the field, and I want that person kicked out. I want the police to go and arrest them and kick them out.
It wasn't the only incident at A-League games on the weekend either, John. Brisbane's supporter group, The Den, walked out of Suncorp Stadium during their team's A-League men's home clash with Melbourne Victory on Sunday in protest after fans had altercations with the police on the way in, John. So another incident there in that Brisbane-Melbourne Victory clash, John.
I think a funny thing, like rugby league players are an issue. Soccer fans are an issue.
Yes.
You're lucky that there's no... at least in rugby league, the fans are mostly good. Well, there was some fighting at Vegas, but mostly good. Just don't take flares and don't fight, and you won't get kicked out. That's it. It's not rocket science, actually.
Yeah,
it's soccer science.
Of course, there's going to be action taken when there's behaviour like that from the fans, John. I mean, what do these supporters expect? They're just they're just a bunch of sooks, John. Walking out over that.
I don't care if you're on my team or support my team. If you bring flares, you should get kicked out. A little bit of tennis news.
Yes.
Andre Rublev has had a massive tanty. Did you watch the footage?
Yes, I did, John. And
massive tanty.
Yeah.
And being defaulted from the match correctly. He's basically brought a flare to a tennis match.
And this is what annoys me, John. I love my tennis, as you know, but there's always such a soft reaction from tennis types over poor behaviour from players on the court. Surprise, surprise, John. Nick Kyrgios tweeted about this incident. He said, Class from Bublik referring to Rublev's opponent, saying he wanted to continue. Respect. Phil for Rublev did not warrant a default. Yeah, Nick Kyrgios of all people saying the behaviour did not warrant a default. Of course, he's going to say that, John. He carries on like a moron on the court a lot of the time.
It actually did warrant a default. Don't scream at people in the face.
That's the thing. I don't think... I mean, Rublev's denying that he swore in Russian at the line judge, but I mean... John, I don't think it matters whether he swore or not. It was the way he was talking to the line judge that was the issue. And look, too often, John, Rublev's just behaved like a drop kick on the court for too long, John, and it's about time the officials stood up to him, and good on them for defaulting him. Kyrgios wasn't the only one, John. Brad Gilbert, Coco Gauff's coach, on Twitter said... Just saw what happened to Rublev on the default in Dubai. The technology is there on every ATP Tour and WTA tournament. Should be mandatory now to have electronic line calling, and for incidentals, so frustrating to not have it now. So much easier for players to accept calls, move on. Again, another tennis type. It's not just Nick Kyrgios looking at the wrong issue here, John. The issue is with the way Rublev spoke to this official. Whether he swore or not, I don't think it's a big deal or not, John. You can't speak to officials like that. I mean, you'd expect Nick Kyrgios to react in this way to it, John, but for Brad Gilbert to react like that as well, I think it's really poor form on his part. These tennis types need to be a lot stronger with calling out this sort of behaviour. And as I said, Rublev has behaved like an absolute moron towards officials for too long, John, and it's about time they stood up to him, and I'm glad that they did.
Yeah, look, I've talked about it before. I referee jiu-jitsu, and every time I do a refereeing thingy, I always shout out the most well-behaved gym representatives. And at the last competition I did, there's a gym called Grappling Education in Cogra. Shout out to Grappling Education, bunch of great guys there. So during matches, if the fighter, the person competing, didn't agree with something I said and started to argue with me, multiple times across different coaches from Grappling Education, the corner would tell them, stop talking, get back to fighting. And I thought that was it's clear that is clearly a thing that has gone through the gym. You know, it's not an individualized thing. It was multiple times across multiple matches. Man, I thought that was actually amazing because you don't understand. They don't understand how hard refereeing is, and it's a really high pressure thing. And you cop it from fans, you cop it from everyone, and you don't have any right to shout at them. Actually,
and you see it as I coach tennis, John, and you see it. This sort of behaviour, it filters down to the juniors. Exactly. They see a Rublev carrying on that way towards a line judge, and they think they can do it to umpires at junior level.
Exactly,
and that's what. But just again, I'm not surprised that Kyrgios has defended him, John. Of course he would. Yeah. But for Brad Gilbert to do it as well. That's really disappointing to me, John.
Those guys should go be linesmen.
To be looking at play. What did Gilbert said? I'll just bring up his tweet again. He says it should be mandatory now to have electronic line calling. He thinks the issues with having electronic line calling as opposed to the way the player speaks to the official. That's a load of that is a garbage response from Brad Gilbert.
Electronic line calling is irrelevant. It's irrelevant because if the electronic line calling gets it wrong, is Rublev going to accept it? Not if it gets it wrong. If he doesn't agree with it,
he's a fiery.
What's he going to do? He's going to go yell at the umpire.
It's deflected rage, John. Yeah. He's not happy with the way he's playing in a match, and he just lets out the frustration on the officials. It's not going to
stop Rublev from shouting at people.
He's carried on like a spoilt brat towards officials for far too long now, Rublev. He blows up at officials all the time, and I'm glad the officials have hit back here, John, and done something about it. This guy needs to be taught that if you have a common occurring problem where you keep yelling at officials, there's one common theme in that. Yes. And it's not the officials, John.
Yeah. Every official gets it wrong. No. It seems to happen to you more than anyone else. But yeah, it's seriously, they should make him go be linesmen and see how they like it, and then get the linesmen to scream at them, because it's so ridiculous. You have to respect referees. You have to. I have stopped fights in refereeing, told the fighters to stop, and then gone and spoken to corners and said, if you guys keep going, I'm going to disqualify both your fighters. I've spoken to fighters, penalised them, and and this is one of the things, obviously in jiu-jitsu, we have this thing, it's in every gym, leave your ego at the door, but you can't leave your ego at the door and then tell everyone to beat each other up. Okay. Yeah. Leave your ego at the door, try and win. But I have actually seen referees lose control of the situation, because everybody is they do jiu-jitsu, so they think they can win. They all have ego. And I've seen referees lose control of situations and not be able to handle it. And I have been the person that has screamed at a referee and made them cry and apologise. I'll never do it again, because now I've experienced refereeing, and you have to have respect for them, and you have to accept their things, and then you have to not have an ego about that. You have to try and win, but you don't yell at people because you get a call against you. It's just too bad. Don't leave it up to the referees. That's what I always say to all of the people I coach. Don't leave it up to the referees. Submit your opponent. Don't leave it up to the linesman. Just be better, Yeah, Rublev's an idiot, and he should. I'm glad he got defaulted, because I watched that and I watched it this morning. I was like, oh my God, this guy, seriously. Yeah,
it's poor form, John, and good on the officials for finally standing up to a player like Rublev, and they should do it a lot more often.
Definitely. But in good news, our man Alex de Minaur, our best male tennis player right now, has won an ATP title.
Yes, I wanted to finish on a good note, John. A lot of talk about poor behaviour from players and fans in this podcast. So I just wanted to finish with a positive here, John. Yeah, well done to Alex de Minaur. Beat Casper Ruud, the 3-time major finalist, John. What a scalp. 6-4, 6-4 to successfully defend the Acapulco title. It's de Minaur's 8th tournament victory on the ATP Tour, John. He's consolidated his spot inside the top 10 in the world, John, as a result of this win in Mexico. Yeah, so well done. That's a big tournament as well, John. Yeah. That gets a lot of the big names. So it's an ATP 500 title. So well done, Alex de Minaur. Yeah. Great effort. Excellent, great news. And, it comes just a fortnight after he went down to Australian Open champion Yannick Sinner in the Rotterdam ATP 500 final. So, as always with Alex de Minaur, a lot of consistent results on the ATP Tour, John, and it's no surprise that he is there in the top 10 with that consistency that he has week in, week out on the tour. He snapped a 4-match losing streak in ATP Tour finals as well there, John.
Well done, Alex de Minaur. Very happy. That's it for sport. What are we going to do for the rest of our lives?
I was just going to say, if you don't mind, John, he joins David Ferrer, Nicolas Almagro, and former world number 1 Thomas Muster in securing successive crowns in Mexico. So, and he's beaten 7 top 10, 15 players. 7 top 15 players this year already, John, and we're only just into March.
Only March.
Beat Djokovic, Alexander Zverev, Taylor Fritz, Rublev. I'm glad he beat Rublev, John, that's for sure. Tsitsipas, Grigor Dimitrov, and Ruud, as we said in that final, John. So
it's awesome.
Well done to Alex there.
No, he's just got to win a Grand Slam for us.
Of course, it comes after Jordan Thompson won that Los Cabos title as well, John, beating Casper Ruud in the final as well.
But somebody's got to win a Grand Slam for us. That's it for sport for the next few days. We've only got one comment in social media blower-uppers. We mustn't have said anything too bad over the last...
Yeah, right, okay. We'll have to... we'll do something about that, John.
Make some fun of soccer fans more. But the General always got a comment. I love it. I laughed so hard when I saw this pop up. He was talking about, obviously Mitch Kenny's been suspended. Kenny meant standing in Boxing Day shopping lines.
Good one, General.
That was gold, man. That's gold. He did. It was just trolls on his phone, remember? And Anthony Weiner didn't mean to send his penis picture. That was the first ever social media thing where it was like, it wasn't me, I must have been hacked, the Anthony Weiner thing, and now it's just become so common. That's the first thing you do. But dude, come on.
Seriously.
Housekeeping. So first round of the tipping comp went. We have a bit of an issue with the ladder that's just being resolved, and so the winner for the $100 weekly prize will be announced later today. In the expert tipping competition, Mitchell Pearce tipped the Roosters, and Craig Gower tipped the Sea Eagles. Me and Dan both got both of the tips wrong.
Early days, John.
Don't worry, I'm going to end up winning. And it's funny, because in one of the comps that actual Mitchell Pearce is in, he's sitting on top of the ladder in one of the comps, so he must have hedged his bets in a few different competitions.
Yeah. That's the way to do it, John.
Yeah, for sure. Don't forget to sign up. You can still win. We've only had 2 games, so there's still 10K up for grabs at the end of the year. Sign up for the tip of the day, and you can also get expert tips. But first round, we got to remember it's only the first round, so we don't know how our form's going to be.
Yeah, only 2 games into the first round. We'll give it some time, John.
Less than a month until Subversion, so you can sign up and win 2 tickets to Subversion, and make sure you follow the SmartB Racing update every Friday with Bryce and Lewis. And of course, don't forget to follow at SmartB app on all social media. And we'll see you all on Thursday for some weekend previews.
Thanks, John. See you then, mate.
Bye, producer John.
See you.